So good afternoon and welcome back to the weekly live of the European Training Foundation, which is part of our Learning Connect series, which this month, the month of June, are focusing on the theme of lifelong learning, which is our monthly campaign main subject. But today we have a very relevant topic to be discussed because, as you know, today we will be discussing about developing career guidance and way more than that, because today is the important day of the launch of a very new publication, a joint product between the ETF and the ILO, which is called Developing National Career Development Support Systems. And I have the great pleasure here of having as guest speakers the contributors, the authors, the minds behind this new product, which will be of help for all of you, the learning community. So I'd like to welcome immediately my guests. So Florian Kadletz, Human Capital Development Expert from the ETF. Welcome, Florian.
Hello.
And then I'd like to welcome Pedro Moreno da Fonseca, Technical Specialist on Lifelong Learning at the ILO. Thank you for being with us, Pedro.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here.
It's a pleasure for us as well. And welcome as well to Raimo Vuorinen, Adjunct Associate Professor at the Finnish Institute for Educational Research, University of Jyväskylä. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. Raimo?
Hello, thank you. It's Jyväskylä. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's at least it's my best pronunciation. So thank you for being with us, and thanks to all of you who are following from wherever you are. As you know, you're already used to these weekly conversations, which happen every Wednesday at 4. So let us know where you are from, what's your name, and in case you have comments or questions for our guest speakers, don't hesitate to share them in the chat and we'll be pleased to take them on board. I'd like to mention that this event is co-hosted and co-organized by our colleagues at the ILO. So thanks to our colleagues for coordinating together this exercise. So let's go straight to business. And I'd like to begin with my colleague Florian. So we talk about career development support. So my first question is, why is it important? Why do we need to talk about it? And maybe for those who are not familiar with it, could you please explain what is understood by career development support? Florian, over to you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Daria. Well, welcome everybody who joined us today. Thanks for this introduction. Well, let me just distinguish a couple of things briefly. Career guidance is about the services provided to individuals, to groups of individuals and their families. Career development is defined as a kind of lifelong process of managing learning, managing work, leisure, and transitions between education and work in order to move towards a personally determined and evolving future. So by focusing on career development, we focus on the individual and his or her family and what he or she needs. Similar a bit to the idea of the learner-centered approach in education. And coming to the support aspect, career development support systems cover a wide variety of services and activities, from lifelong career guidance. And there in particular, what we like to emphasize is career education, because it's a key tool to provide access to guidance to all young people in mandatory education and also beyond. 2, career development support for workers, looking at formal employees, support to workers in the informal sector, and support for new forms of self-employment. You know, there is a lot of talk about the increasing amount of freelancers, contract workers, platform workers. So briefly, while career development as term focuses on the individual, lifelong career guidance describes the services which help those individuals and the groups of individuals and their families of any age to manage their careers and to make the educational, the training and the occupational choices that are meaningful for them. And this, by the way, is a joint definition shared by UNESCO, by ILO, by ETF, CDFOP, and the OECD. So in a nutshell, career guidance involves provision of careers information, personalized group guidance or counseling, assessments that support self-appraisal and career exploration, important, of course, employment, engagement with employers and job placements, and career education. But important is that these services have to be thought and seen from the point of view of the individual and his or her family and needs. So coming back to your first question, why is career development support important? Managing learning, managing work, leisure, as well as learning and work transitions over a lifetime is already a very dynamic and complex thing. It's context specific, it's influenced by many personal and social factors. And what we see now is that global developments such as digitalization, globalization, demographic change, climate change, global disruptions like financial economic crises and the health pandemic like COVID-19, they all make the decisions about learning and work more complex. And they increase the need of individuals to deal with more frequent and complex transitions within and between work. And this not only holds true for young people, but for all. So saying this, you can understand this increases the need for national career development support systems. And as you might have noticed, in reaction to these global developments, there is a paradigm shift away from matching an individual's skills to jobs at an early stage of a life, to be ready for a life path, a stable one, moving away from providing guidance at transition points only, especially focusing again on the young generations. Going in another direction, the trend goes towards supporting individuals over their lifetime in developing the skills that allow them to manage the frequent and the complex transitions they face and that they will face. That is why we talk about career management skills. Interesting, maybe a quick reference, the latest round of the ETF Torino process assessment confirms that there is a rising demand for career development support in the countries we work with. And also a recent update of a leaflet, it's called Investing in Career Guidance, that will be published now in June by an interagency group on TVET, which is UNESCO, ILO, European Commission, ETF, CDFOP, including the CareersNet, OECD and ICCDPP. They all argue that career guidance has a special part to play in recovery plans now. Mm-hmm. And there is very solid evidence for policymakers that investment in guidance provides actually positive economic, educational, and social returns, both to individuals and society. So, but the important point here is that still too many countries don't offer sufficient access to guidance, particularly to those that are really in need. So in answering your question, there are consequently two main rationales to work on career development support. There is a need to support all diverse groups of young people and their families, and there is a need to support all diverse groups of adults in their career development, especially because of the growing pressure for adults to up and reskill. And finally, a last note, if I may, a recent ETF report on international trends in innovation in career guidance highlighted two things. One, career development support is one of the key responses to changing labor markets and related changing skills demands, but that also career guidance needs to innovate and evolve itself to remain relevant and functional. So any support system in place, may it be well developed or at the beginning stage, needs to be adapted in the light of those global developments that I mentioned before. And ILO and ETF try to provide support in this, as we will hear today.
Thank you very much, Florian, for the overview which you've provided. And I already actually have two spontaneous questions which are coming to my mind, but I keep this for later as a surprise. Before we move to our next speaker, I'd like to start welcoming our participants who are so kind to say hello and where they are from. So we have Silvia from Spain, we have Adnan from Pakistan, Ertuğrul from Turkey, Kazadi from, Germain from India. I'll keep on going through. Bassem from Algeria, Pepino from Italy, Wissam from Palestine, Liliana Piret from Denmark, Sabina from Azerbaijan, Alicia from Spain. So as you can see, those who said hello are really representative, and Edem from Ghana, who just wrote now. Thank you for being with us, and please do not hesitate to send your questions. So Pedro from the International Labour Organization. This joint publication which we are presenting today, and I kindly ask my colleagues to share the link to download the publication in the chat so you all can have and get your copy, is the result of a cooperation between international bodies. So my question to you is, what is the, with a wider eye, what is the particular contribution of career development support to achieving wider policy objectives in education, in the economic and in the social policy? What's the wider impact of good career development support systems?
Thank you. I think we're witnessing a shift in paradigm in the sense that we had, let's say, 20 years ago, an acknowledgement of the role of career guidance in itself and its importance for individuals and their careers. Then there was, let's say, an acknowledgement of the importance to have a sort of consistent policy approach with a certain level of coordination, which I would suggest is what happened in the last 10 to 15 years. And now we are witnessing a more organic integration, I think, and understanding, deeper understanding of what is career development and the role it can play in, let's say, deeper processes and deeper policy, more complex policies and more articulated policies coordinated in between themselves. So as Florian was mentioning, we are talking about lifelong support to individuals. We are talking about something which has an impact scope which is both individual and communitarian. And we are talking about a high diversity of sectors. So therefore, we are talking about the need to acknowledge the instrumental role which career development support activities have in enabling a number of different policies, in increasing their effectiveness, and in fact in increasing their efficiency. So there's also actually a budgetary rationale for if you actually want to go as far as reasoning in that direction. So for example, they are, and this is, let's say, the basis, they are instrumental, of course, for active labor market policies. As we know, they have a strong role in providing career guidance to unemployed people, but not only unemployed. These days, public employment services also provide services to other groups of inactive people, vulnerable groups of several types through outreach initiatives, and therefore also need to complexify and have a more clear understanding of what career development activities need to be developed to, in a way, increase their effects over the employability of individuals, and also try to minimize returns into dependency of benefits of several types by individuals. Career development is also, career development support is also instrumental for a real achievement of lifelong learning. It seems that finally systems all over the world, so not only in Europe, but all over the globe, are advancing towards accomplishing a vision of lifelong learning through the diversification of the training offered, through the flexibilization of training offer and of learning opportunities, and career guidance, career education will play a very strong role in enabling individuals to navigate this more complex universe, which is now appearing, these opportunities for learning, and to help people understand how they can achieve qualifications, how can they achieve decent work through these opportunities, which are now growing also on a digital level. They're also important in terms of social protection policies, for example, to the extent that Social Security and other types of social protection provide access to learning opportunities, to activation opportunities. And so career guidance has a bridge role in enabling people to do this correctly. Youth policies, especially not only for youth transitioning into the labor market, but also for youth making initial transitions within the labor market. Let's just see what happened during this crisis, where you had a huge growth in youth unemployment, and now you have young people had just recently entered the labor market and suddenly need to reorient their whole strategy. So also there you have a role to play. And we cannot forget the whole universe of the workers themselves who are in enterprises, who are also working in formal contexts, and who also can benefit from this type of support if well. So just very synthetically, if I had to identify the key impacts, I would say one key impact is enabling access to lifelong learning for all, enabling, improving learning and labor market outcomes, again, for all groups in the population, supporting transitions within the labor market and from informal to formal economic sectors, improving work-life balance because people know how to navigate better their careers, also contributing to the growth of gender equity in the access to learning and to decent work, because women become more aware of the opportunities they have and they become empowered to access these opportunities in many places where these situations might be difficult. Also, there are research identifies effects over civil participation, positive effects of civic participation, and finally, better utilization of skills in workplaces through an improvement on human resource development activities. So this means that for enterprises, you have, for example, better productivity, more innovation, etc. So there's a plethora of effects, I would say.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for having so clearly expressed and highlighted the positive impact of investments in career development support systems. Again, a question came to my mind, but I keep it for later. And before giving the floor to Raimo, I'd like to flag that Maria Erotokritou sent a question asking what assistance funding opportunities exist for non-young adults. There seem to be a lot of opportunities only for younger people. Please do keep this question in mind, dear speakers, because I will address this to you right after having given the floor to Raimo. Raimo, thank you again for being with us. You're also the chair of the board of International Center for Career Development and Public Policies, what Florian before mentioned, like ICCDPP, for those who do not know the meaning of this acronym. I'd like you to present to those who are following this conversation what is the aim of this joint ILO ETF publication, and if it does include any recipe for success. Does it include any recipe of success, Raimo?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good question. We are often asked that what is the best way to provide career development support, but it's very difficult to answer because during the last 20 years, when we have had international cooperation, we have found out that there is not one single model that could be borrowed or sort of exported to another country without contextualization. So, for example, when I was looking at the participants within this event, we come from different countries. We have different administration cultures. We have different cultures. We have different political and economic stages in our development. So the context is quite different. But instead of this saying which system is best, we have been able to identify some features a well-functioning system in certain context. And these are questions which countries need to solve in one way or another, regardless of the context. So identifying the key questions, what are features of a national career development systems? And we could call these reference points, which we can use for mutual policy learning. So the paper is drawing on international experiences from the last 20 years. Between 2000 and 2010, roughly 55 countries were carrying out similar evaluations of their national systems and policies, and these were coordinated by OECD, European Training Foundation, CDFOP, World Bank. And the outcome of these evaluation was key findings or these reference points. And we were able to identify that a number of countries were having good practices, but none of the countries had developed sort of an adequate system that would cater needs for all age groups or like a coherent national lifelong kind of systems. There were a number of ICT or number of sort of applications of technology, but the full potential of technology was not used. But then the importance of the career development as a support system was acknowledged, but there was not sufficient evidence to identify what would be the real outcomes, what the Pedro was identifying. But what we were able to find some strength that we are building on. We have now a common understanding of the features of a national guidance and career development support system. And we have been able to identify that the need is lifelong, like the Florian was identifying. And we also found out that the career development system has to be, we need to customize them to meet the local conditions. And we need to link career education or career development system to wider policy goals. We need to acknowledge it's both private and public good, and we need this type of common understanding and coordination to sort of agree how does career development contribute to this wider goal what Pedro was identifying. So to sum up, instead of a good, let's say, best practices or recipes, we can identify elements which characterize a well-functioning system based on the evidence what we can utilize. And there are many parallel initiatives already going on and examining this, how we can use them to support national development. And these are the CDFOP network of career experts, which we call CarriersNet. And then the ETF is having the country fact sheets, and ILO is already carrying out these national policy reviews, which are utilizing this same approach. So this is like the previous evaluation. They were acting like catalysts for this dialogue, what we are carrying out today. So then going back to the content of the report, so these 5 features that we have found out, which are currently indicating well-functioning systems, is coordination and governance of the activities. It's also the funding mechanisms, how we identify the quality features of the system, how we guarantee access to all age groups, and how we use the technology. And I'm highlighting, for example, that often we have heard now that career development systems contribute to, in most countries, education, employment, social, youth policies, and there is a like sectoral interest to sort of support the supplier-driven approach. But when we shift this focus to individual, like Florian said, my needs go to more than one policy direction. So that's why it's important that we bring the stakeholders and key policy sectors together to agree how we can sort of create a common understanding of the joint outcomes, and then how to commit to work towards these goals using the expertise and resources which are available within each sectors. So we need this type of strategic thinking, and also then developing measures how we promote the governance, like legislation, competence standards, or standards for the service delivery. But if there is not sort of a space for legislation, we can create representative structures or forums to agree on certain priorities. And then this relates to funding. How we use, one of the questions was related to funding, that how we can extend the funding from youth also to adults, and also those who are employed, or taking into account the vulnerable groups. We try to sort of think how to pool resources from different sources to create this type of seamless national system. And this relates to the quality issues. We need coordination to agree on those targets that we want to reach, and then some milestones and indicators that we can follow up the accountability of the funding that is sort of used for this purpose, but also to identify whether we are doing the right things and whether we can measure the efficacy of the resources what we have used. Then the access relates to guaranteeing that how we integrate this career development and career education within curriculum, but also support widening access to students in VET, higher education, adult learning, those who are employed or those who are in a career shift for careers, and sort of upskilling themselves. So trying to get access through different channels. And then we come to the technology. Often technology is just used to create tools for separate guidance functions or activities that which don't not necessarily work together, so there's no interoperability. So in order to get the best use of technology, we have to think, what is this framework, or what are the overall goals of the career development system, and how we use technology to bring these different components together, how we share common data, real-time data, and provide access to, let's say, real-time access to those who really need to get access to this information, and how we use technology to follow up and get evidence for the system. So this, to sum up, the report highlights some of the definitions. What do we mean by career development systems? What is the terminology we use in different languages? And then what are the sort of, why is it important? And what are features of a well-functioning systems? And then countries can pick up the elements which are relevant for them and fits to their context, and how to elaborate them further to improve the systems and to this type of a coherent national lifelong career development support system.
Thank you very much, Raimo, also for having addressed the question of our friend who is following us, Maria. I hope, Maria, that your question was answered, and if not, please interact with us again via the chat. I've seen that there are some more followers who said where they are from and who just joined. We have Asna from Morocco, Monia from Tunisia, Arafat from Palestine, and I see many more, sorry, Wildut from Azerbaijan, and Kiran from Pakistan. So welcome on board. We're talking about career development support systems on the day of the launch of a brand new publication, joint product from the International Labour Organization and the European Training Foundation. If you joined just now, don't leave us for the next 30 minutes. Send your questions and click on the links which appear in the chat if you want to download your own free copy of the report. Florian, so I've asked Raimo whether there was a concrete recipe in the report There are a number of extremely interesting highlights, but no real recipe. So what is the aim of a publication if there is no recipe? Because, you know, we're used to asking for easy replies to complex questions. This is a global trend, apparently. So what's your answer to that?
Thanks, I like your question. Well, simply said, we want to facilitate national reflections, deliberations. I mean, as you have heard before, there is enough evidence for policymakers to integrate career development support into wider strategies, from lifelong learning to adult learning to public employment service, reform activities, sector skill strategies, because it can do a lot of good, because it supports the achievement of those various objectives. So the ILO ETF paper aims, simply said, at first creating the awareness amongst all relevant stakeholders to think career development support as an integral part of wider education, economic, employment, social, youth, and health policies. So with the paper, we want to provide an entry point to deep policy dialogue on career development support systems. We also propose a very concrete process for evidence-based national system development that is, as Pedro highlighted before, context sensitive, and it is adaptable, but it always is based on national reviews and on evidence for further action planning. So important is that we propose a process that prepares the ground for system development in close partnership with all stakeholders, national, regional, local, international, public, private, and also across policy areas.
Thank you very much, Florian. I was thinking that one of the super interesting aspects of this publication, also following what was mentioned before by Raimo when he went through the geographic origins of most of our followers, and he said that they do come from different countries, different administration, different restrictions, cultures, and this of course does have an impact on discussing and developing careers development support systems. What's really interesting is that this is the joint product of two international bodies which do have theoretically different geographical scopes, but on this matter forces are joined so as to widen the debate and the discussion on how to improve, because as you just said earlier on, and this is a crucial point, developing well-functioning career development system just have an impact on countries, on economies, on societies, and even more so in this phase in which we all are aware of what a sudden transition means. Hello from our friends, to our friends who are coming also and saying hello from North Macedonia. We are expanding our geographic scope now. So Pedro, since we've mentioned countries and the countries which are the origin of our friends, you have Joe from the Netherlands as well. How will countries who do have an interest in developing their career development support systems be helped and endorsed in creating valuable support systems? Pedro.
I would like to start with a point that was made already a bit, that there is a great diversity of national contexts which require specific solutions. I mean, the geographical scope of the ILO and ETF has some overlap, and then, but we have a particular, both organizations have a particular interest in addressing this diversity. You have different demographies, different economies, different degrees of economic informality, different patterns of vulnerability in population groups. And so this all needs to be very well understood, and the approaches need to be contextualized, while at the same time, as Raimo was focusing, we are looking into the same reference points to try to think about systematically about the quality of the services, the way the system is organized. So I think that to begin with, the publication itself provides a lot of reference points, a lot of orientation on this level, because it for one thing, it helps clarify the concepts which are mobilized at national level to think about these issues in an organized fashion, to think about what is done in schools, to think about what is done in training institutes, to think about what is done in employment services inside of enterprises, and which is not always clear in many countries, both on behalf of the stakeholders and on the legislation itself, for example. It provides also a discussion, and as Florian said, an entry point, a discussion on the desirable outcomes when you are trying to undertake measures to develop the system. So how can you do it? What has been done in other places? Which ways could you think about how to increase access or diversify funding, for example? And so you can, not only it helps, let's say, carry a national discussion, but it also provides insights onto certain examples that the readers can follow up on. And of course, we are available to provide further information or contacts wherever it's requested of us. I think that one second aspect is that we are promoting this process that has been very briefly mentioned of national reviews of the career development support systems. So the intention of these reviews is really to look into the gaps and potentials of the systems, trying to be as comprehensive as possible. So looking into what's happening with career guidance in schools and with career education, what's happening in the employment services, but also, and very importantly, what's happening in career development support within the enterprise environments and in linkage with the response to skills needs in the economies. And I think this is an important additional and new element of these reviews in comparison with reviews which existed before. Also, there is a very particular concern with countries which might have a system which is still weakly developed and which have to deal with a high degree of social vulnerability in their populations. So these reviews allow to do an assessment of the system, which can support then the countries to initiate a national dialogue and eventually arrive to a shared vision, a prioritization of actions to undertake, planning of these concrete planning of these actions, and create a monitoring and evaluation system for the undertaking of these actions. So on that level, we are available, and when I say we, ILO and ETF, let's say, to mediate this process, to support this process, and to, in a way, help countries achieve their own theory of change for their own system, so that the countries find their own solution, not a recipe, a universal recipe, but their own solution for their own challenges. Just to give you an example, today we were in a very engaging discussion with one of these reviews, which is being undertaken in Vietnam, in which we had a very lively discussion with national stakeholders who were very open, put their vision forward, their opinions forward of what needs to have greater insight, what should be prioritized, and you could. It was not only what was being said, but you had a palpable engagement, excitement in the air, and people were motivated to engage in national change. We are also undertaking at the moment a review in Panama and one in Moldova, and we look forward to start similar processes in other countries. Of course, we will also be available to the extent, of course, there are available resources and all of that to support processes, projects leading to the development of national capacities, so that there's a flexible space for engagement with our organizations and with the national stakeholders. From the side of just to say one last thing, from the side of the ILO, and I believe also will be the case in ETF, we attribute a great role not only to governments in this change, but to civil society, starting with social partners, but also the representatives of consumer groups and the representatives of practitioners. And so we hope to have them engage also in these processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And I take the some inputs from your speech. The first one is that the doors are open, so I kindly ask my colleague to share the link to at least for the ETF open space, the community on which you all can have a word and engage with whomever is interested in the learning sector. So the doors are open, and also the doors of the ILO, like Pedro just said earlier on. And I've seen that there are many questions popping up in the chat. So since we have 17 minutes before the end, and before asking my colleague Florian on what's in the pipeline for the next months, I'd like really to give space to our followers. I kindly ask you, dear interviewees, maybe to give like a bit punchy replies to the questions, because we have really many, and this is an index of success, and I'm very pleased with that. So Joke Post is asking, has the pandemic, in your opinion, given more arguments to the claim that career guidance is more a public than a private good? Would like to take this on board. There will be space for all of you. Volunteer?
Actually, I would say that both. I would say both, and often we have been listening that the pandemic has been sort of crucial in such way that people get unemployed, but in some cases it has been a catalyst for career change. So in order when you have lost your job, it's sort of there are new opportunities which are emerging. So there are, from individual perspective, there are both this type of implications, which might be negative or positive depending on your situation. But thinking of it as a public good as well, it helps on the recovery. So I wouldn't say that it's more or less, but it's sort of a strength, making these demands more visible and are more explicit. And I think that would be my answer to this question.
Thank you very much, Raimo. And then we pick the question from Alistair, who is asking that in many countries which are concerned by this study, the majority of employment is the informal sector. How can career guidance reach the informal sector? Would like to take this one.
I can talk about this, and I would like to at the same time also talk about this issue of poor relationship with education and training, because I think this is very connected with the true implementation of lifelong learning systems, to the extent that you are addressing learning and access to decent jobs by people on all situations. So people might be working in informality, people who are in enterprises and doing non-formal learning. So, for example, one way to create this reach is to link strongly guidance to the recognition of prior learning, for example, and to the development of individual pathways in lifelong learning. But this requires that there is a good coordination between these activities of validation, and also that there is a policy for the definition of learning incentives, of incentives to training, which targets the sectors where people are, independently of being informally or not working there, connects them to the access to qualifications and to the needs that the economy has, to the skills needs that the economy has. So what I'm saying, in a way, is that guidance needs to be an integral part, and in a way, the particle which oils the whole relationship inside of lifelong learning policies, which should in turn be very strongly grounded on skills needs, on what the country could be in the future, on the strategic vision that is open for the country. Of course, there needs to be a strategic vision too.
Can I add to this very general? I like very much the argumentation of a rights-based approach to it. I like saying that basically every country, even in their constitutions, have written that they want and need to ensure that people have access to some decent work and a good livelihood. And this is the argumentation for career development support. We just need to go back to these basic institutional documents, or to main strategic documents in countries, and it's all there already. So I would say there is a very strong argument already that a country has actually to deliver on providing career development support.
May I just intervene once also, because Florian is making me want to speak of it. The thing is that there is, of course, the development of entitlements. Now it's a big discussion in Europe, yes? But I think it's important to think about entitlements in a wide fashion, independently of the shape they take. And partially, what generates the entitlement is the economic capacity to access the services. So, for example, the option might be just that there is a public offer of the service that is universal access, but you can offer it, for example, through vouchers that are freely available to the population, which is, for example, the option that has been followed by Belgium, by Flanders in Belgium. So there are many ways to set up this access.
Thank you very much, Pedro and Florian, for taking on board the question I flagged in the online on the top of our conversation, the two questions, because Pedro also took the one on this supposedly poor relation of career guidance in education and training systems. So thank you, Pedro. So let's keep on picking up questions from our followers. Thanks a million. Keep on sharing those. We still have 10 minutes to go. Liliana is going on a relatively technical question on what are the desirable relationships between career development systems and national qualification systems, like standardization and certification of competencies, qualifications, frameworks. Would like to take this one? It's a tough one. I know.
I can talk again. I don't want to monopolize with but I think there are. I see at least two strong connections here. One is what I mentioned of the strong connection with recognition and validation systems, and I think that's an important point, especially in the current situation, where you have a number of people who have to reskill and need to upskill, need to change jobs, might need to change the sectors of activity, and so you have a very strong connection with all the qualifications mechanism, with the certification systems through that angle. And I think that you need a very clear articulation. You need guidance services to inform individuals about the existence of this possibility, the existence of complementary training, also the existence of certifiable short learning that can be accumulated towards the acquisition of qualifications. And this brings in also the current discussion on micro credentials. So there is a very strong connection, but this invites also to the need of providing or extending the capacity of practitioners and services to coordinate with other services, to network with other professionals, and also the way in which individuals are referenced from one service to the other, so that they are supported seamlessly across services. Another aspect that I think it's important is the funding, to the extent that it seems that there is an increased capacity in funding of services if the coordination of the services is somehow associated also with the certification and the qualification system. And this is something to think about and to look into the examples that exist in certain countries, because then you make career development an integral part of policies which aim at raising skills and qualifications and address and coordinate, let's say, the social needs and the economic needs of the countries. So I think there needs to be some background thinking on where is the best place also to situate these activities in terms of strategy, national strategy.
Can I add to this?
Of course, Raimo.
Yeah, what Pedro said, that when we think the competence framework and standards, they are like the content which are used for career development. It's sort of it includes both the content and the process. And now, sometimes if we think of the changes in the working life, sometimes the work or job profile is within one competence, but it can be a hybrid. So it's a cluster of skills which are needed to perform the job, either employed, self-employed, or in other contractual arrangements. So this implies that as an individual, I need skills to identify to what extent I can use my current skills. If they are external or internal drivers that require change, then I need to be able to identify new learning goals for myself, and then how to obtain these skills either in workplace learning or through formal education or through this validation or competence frameworks. So the emphasis on career development is we should have emphasis both on the content, the information that I need to know from myself and in the environment, and then the skills to identify how I'm using this information in different phases of transition. So this is a competence which can be learned, and that's a new sort of element of the career development system as such.
One very quick and simple addition. When you just look at an education system, let's say a graphic description of it, that tells a lot about how the guidance system also needs to be set up. So when you have a system that is very permeable, where you can move from one to another, it's easier, But if you have a system that is not permeable, where it's not easy to move from one side to another, there is much more to do for guidance. I mean, there's anyway always a good reason for having guidance, but it depends also on the system you have, on the qualification system, what type of guidance you need.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Raimo. Thank you, Pedro, for having taken on board one of the many questions which we are receiving. I think I'll pick one or maximum two, and then we'll wrap up with what's next from Florian. Kiran Zubair is asking how to guide university students for change in demanding career in this new normal by labor market. I assume Kiran is active on the ground, and she's asking you as international experts some advice, some tips. Would you have any?
I would start here that if I develop career support systems within higher education, I wouldn't focus only how to complete a degree or find a job. So I would include an element of this type of career management skills development throughout the whole program as a sort of time slot and sort of a bottom line that sort of helps me to develop skills to link the learning opportunities and reflect their labor market relevance in the future. So in order to not only how to complete a degree, but how I identify my skills to potential employers or my clients, and then later on having the skills to identify learning goals and read the signals if I have to upskill. So in a way, including the career management skills component within the curriculum of higher education programs.
Can I add to this briefly?
Yeah.
Sorry, Pedro, quick comment. We had peer learning meetings with universities in ETF, and one question was always, how can I assure that they find a job afterwards? And I think a very important and quick answer is talk to them before they actually sign up for a certain program, because the guidance before is very important and
Exactly.
It's often neglected. So good guidance before they sign up is important. And there, I know we come into the problem between marketing and guiding. So of course, every institution wants to have to attract the best and the most students, but the difference is that guidance also includes information about real opportunities after having finished the program. And marketing is only about telling how great the program is. And I think that makes the difference. Sorry, Pedro, back to you.
I'll be very quick. I just to reinforce the point of don't do it all at the end. I mean, I think there's very interesting work in terms of definition of personal portfolios in higher education, but probably that work needs to flow through the whole degree. And I think you shouldn't you neglect the fact that you can have a different relationship between universities and the labor market, which also again passes through the incentives which exist for graduates to actually acquire skills which are relevant for the labor market. And there are programs which invest on that. And they also invest reciprocally in bringing very skilled professionals from the industry into the university and acquiring higher education qualifications. I'm thinking about the case of South Africa. So there are international examples which are relevant and from which we can learn, and which, of course, all this can play a great role. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. We have 2 minutes to go, so I'll ask Florian in 60 seconds if he can flag what's next. What are the activities planned for those who are interested to knowing more and getting engaged on the topic of career development support systems? Florian?
Thanks. I'll be very quick. So as Pedro announced for the ILO, also ETF is supporting the national system reviews. Sorry, but more concretely, there is sorry, I need to.
I'm sorry. Actually, 2 days ago, Florian lost his voice.
Yeah.
We were crossing fingers that he would make it for this live.
So apologies. So very, very concretely, there is an ILO ETF event coming up on the 27th of October, where we will deepen the policy dialogue on the content of the publication. Very practical training course online will be offered by the ICCDPP, ILO and ETF together in November, December. Also linked to that publication we're talking about. And what I wanted to say before, yeah, ETF like ILO is ready, of course, to support the national system reviews. We will use the rest of the year to talk to countries. One last comment, ILO ETF, of course, continues to ensure that the topic of career development support will remain on the agenda through their work at international level and regional, but also national level. So I'll keep it there to be short, and back to you, Daria.
Thank you very much. So we are at 5 p.m. Central European Summer Time sharp. So it's time to close this thought-provoking conversation about developing career guidance on the day of the launch of a joint ILO ETF publication, Developing National Career Development Support Systems, which you can download both on the website of the ETF and on the website of the ILO. Please stay connected with us. Do register on the Open Space platform. Do not miss our next Learning Connect live, which is not happening in a week from now, but it will be happening already this Friday at 10:30 a.m. Central European Time, answering the question, can we build lifelong learning systems? And it will be a great conversation with Stefania Giannini, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education, and Cesare Onestini, ETF Director. So thank you all for following, for sending your questions, and thanks to the distinguished speakers of today, Florian Kadletz, Human Capital Development Expert from the ETF. Thank you, Florian.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.
Thanks to Pedro Moreno da Fonseca, Technical Specialist on Lifelong Learning from the ILO. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thanks, Raimo Vuorinen, Adjunct Associate Professor at the Finnish Institute for Educational Research, University of Jyväskylä.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raimo. Thanks a million to my colleague Michela Zabaya from the technical support, to Jeanette Sanchez from the ILO for the cooperation and for co-hosting this event with us. Thanks to you all, and I wish you a great evening. Bye-bye.